My name is Max Reball. I am wearing two hats here at the moment. The one more obvious hat that I'm wearing is written on my t-shirt. Polkadot East is a growth and IR initiative for Polkadot in Hong Kong. Working on this together with my colleagues Vincent and Thibaut, who are somewhere here in the audience floating around. We basically represent the Web3 Foundation here in Hong Kong, and that's why we're particularly honored and happy to have Polkadot and Gavin Wood come to Hong Kong today. So we do a lot of events. We have our regular meetup, for example. For all of you guys who are Hong Kong based, quick reminder, every first Tuesday of the month, we do our little get-together in Tai Kwun, where we have drinks and talk about everything Polkadot. Very casual get-together, best way to get connected to the Polkadot community in Hong Kong. So if you haven't signed up to that yet, please do sign up and join us there. Now, the other hat that I am wearing is Harbor Industrial Capital, which is a Polkadot-focused VC fund. I'm running that together with my colleague Mario. So we started about 3 years ago, investing in Polkadot-based projects, and are just about to launch our second fund. We're based here in Hong Kong as well, and so I can also say welcome on behalf of Harbor Industrial Capital. Obviously very excited to have a lot of Polkadot-based projects coming to Hong Kong here today. But clearly the most exciting thing is to have Gavin Wood, who will be coming here a bit later in the afternoon and deliver a lecture as part of the Jam Tour, which is taking him to, 5, 6 global business hubs to talk about Jam, which is kind of the next iteration of Polkadot. A little bit more housekeeping before we kick it off. We are doing this whole thing as part of Consensus. So we will also have a booth for Polkadot at the Consensus event, which is taking place here in Wan Chai on Wednesday and Thursday. And so one announcement here, we have a few more tickets for Consensus. In case you don't have a ticket yet, just for your information, the face value of these tickets is like $800 US. We're gonna hand out, I think, 3 tickets at the end of this pre-jam event. And the way we're gonna hand it out is by running a little quiz on Polkadot-focused trivia. So I'll tell you more about that, how we're gonna run this quiz, but it should be very interactive and it's gonna test your knowledge about Polkadot. If you're one of the lucky winners, then you are gonna get a free Consensus ticket. So stick around for that. That being said, I think we're now really ready to kick it off. We have 2 keynote presentations, and the first one is gonna be delivered by Tommy, who is also known as Alice and Bob, Polkadot ecosystem agent and founder of OpenGuild.watch, and he's gonna walk us through all the latest and greatest exciting things that are happening on Polkadot and the Polkadot roadmap. So with that, over to you, Tommy.
Good morning. How are you doing? All right, I got a nice clicker today and I got a nice stage, so let's make the best out of it. And we're talking about Polkadot, and specifically the Polkadot roadmap. And we're gonna have funny letters today because this is what happens when you export from Google spreadsheets to PowerPoint. Okay, let's see. So, first of all, let me commend you that you're here at a Polkadot event today, because it's the week of Consensus and you could have chosen any event today that you're going to, right? But you're choosing Polkadot, and I think it's a pretty good choice because what we do at Polkadot is that we not just think about what is happening the next year or the next few years and how can we optimize for the next few years, but rather how can we build a truly Web3 ecosystem. So my name is Edison Bob. I do ecosystem development in Polkadot. You can follow me on Twitter, Telegram, YouTube, or connect and reach out. And so I want to get to know you a little bit. So raise your hand if you consider yourself a Polkadot native person. Polkadot native. Okay, a few people. Good, the other ones. Are you interested in Polkadot, or do you consider yourself you want to build on Polkadot, or you want to learn about Polkadot? Right. Okay, I would say we have like roughly a 50-50 mix here. So we're gonna take an introduction today into Polkadot, but let's see, because it's gonna be fast. Okay, so what we're doing at Polkadot is a little bit similar to what you see here. So what you see here is the ENIAC. It was the first ever computer being built, right? And we consider Polkadot and Polkadot Jam specifically to be the first computer, the first fully decentralized multi-core computer that exists in blockchain. So what you typically have in blockchain is, for example, Bitcoin, which is more like a calculator, right? You can subtract and add numbers. You have Ethereum, which is like a first generation of a computer. It was basically a proof that you can have a virtual machine, a computer running. And then you have Polkadot. And Polkadot is a multi-core computer. So it's basically like the computers that you have today that have multiple computer cores, processor cores in their, on the machine. And when we're going to talk about the design of Jam a little bit later today, when Gavin Wood is going to talk about it, you will see that the design is approaching a thing that actually resembles a computer. So I want to start with this vision. The thing we want to build with Polkadot is it's the best place to build Web3. Polkadot is the best place to build Web3. And what we mean by that is to realize the full vision of Web3, which is that it's not just this thing living on the internet, being its own things where meme coins are being pumped, but rather it's a system that benefits the real world, that benefits the businesses, that benefits our lives, where we can build our social systems. And so to realize this vision, we need to create the best place to build Web3. So it needs to be focused on developers, it needs to be focused on the tinkerers, it needs to be ready for the enterprises, and also for the Web2 developers. Because today there is millions of Web2 developers, but if you start talking with them about Web3, suddenly it gets very fuzzy and complicated because Web3 is still a very specialized technology. And what we actually want to create is a technology that is so simple that every Web2 developer can actually tap into it. You just give them an API and they can use it. Okay, so when we talk about Polkadot, when you get your introduction to your average blockchain ecosystem, it gets very technical very quickly. So, and Polkadot is no different. You know, it's like Polkadot, we love to be very technical. But when we zoom out and when we look at it from a high-level perspective, what we see is two things that are important to us, which is Polkadot Cloud and Polkadot Hub. So this is a very different conversation than what you typically have when you talk about roll-ups and all that stuff. But Polkadot Cloud is the idea. I think this one is better. So Polkadot Cloud is the idea that we have a scalable platform to deploy resilient, highly customizable Web3 applications. So the focus here is on applications, like you have Amazon Web Services, like you have Google Cloud. These systems, what they enable for us is that we can just have applications, we can deploy them, and we don't have to think about on which server are they running and how is the network configured. We just develop our applications and we deploy them. And so this is the idea that we're following. So the mantra that we typically have for that is that Polkadot will do for Web3 like Amazon Web Services did for Web2. And so that's quite a big step, because today when you talk about blockchain, it's typically about how to deploy smart contracts and roll-ups and RPCs and all that stuff. And so we still have some way to go to hide all of that complexity. But what Polkadot Cloud gives us is a vision of how much we want to simplify all the blockchain stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the roadmap, and we will also see and understand where Polkadot Jam is positioned in the whole thing. So last year in Singapore at Token 2049, there was this roadmap presentation from Ethereum and the Beacon chain, and they basically talked about how until the year 2029 they want to have a simplified way of how they can basically allow all the rollups to be natively executed on Ethereum. So this roadmap, in the Polkadot community, we were a little bit amused because this is basically the system that Polkadot launched in 2021. So the system that Polkadot launched in 2021 is you have a tech stack, you can build your own chain, you can call it a rollup or you can call it a parachain, but you build your own chain and you deploy it, and it runs with shared security and interoperability. Now this was in 2021. Since then, the work that we've put in, we now phrase it as Polkadot 2.0. And what it basically does is we take all the learnings from building Polkadot and building your own chain. And what we see is that applications have very different resource requirements. Some just need a little bit of resources and some need a lot of resources. So for example, Mythical is running the Polkadot ecosystem. And it's right after Ethereum, it's the #2 ecosystem in terms of NFT sales volume and I think holders and transactions. So if you run a gaming chain, that needs a lot of resources, and it might not be enough to take the resources that a single chain has. Maybe it needs more throughput, maybe it needs more data. And so what we did with Polkadot 2.0 is basically create a system where your chain can scale with the demand that it has. You can deploy it very simply and just produce a few blocks every few hours or whatever, and you can scale it up to use multiple of our Polkadot cores and basically get exactly the amount of throughput and data availability that you need. And then we come to Polkadot Jam, and I will talk about this in a minute. Hey, tech guy. Thank you. Okay, so Polkadot 1.0, what is it? I apologize for these slides. This is not how it started. Okay, Polkadot 1.0. So it has parachains and it runs under WASM, which is a very nice technology where you can basically build your applications in Rust and then it compiles and it runs and it's a very portable system, but we can do better. We started with 12-second blocks, and Polkadot has 50 cores on Polkadot, and then on Kusama we have 100 blocks right now, and the data throughput that you have is basically 0.8 megabytes per second per core. So core is a blockchain in this context. Okay, I think I'm going to, okay, so then we have Polkadot 2.0. So this is our innovation and how can we scale the whole thing. And so what we do is we introduce this idea of cores. So instead of saying everything is a chain, we basically have cores, like a computer has multiple computing cores. And your chain might need a tenth of a core, or your chain might need 3 cores. But the idea is that we basically create this underlying computer, and it has these computing resources, and the computer is specialized to exactly provision these cores, which is very different when you think about Ethereum, where you pay in gas and you basically have a single computer, right? So we are creating a system where you can have however many machines running on top of it, and they can basically tell how many computing resources they need, exactly as you have it in the cloud. We were able to push it to 6 seconds per block, and right now, this is being rolled out 2-second block time. So if your chain wants to have 2-second blocks, this is basically rolling out right now, and we will have it live in, I think, Q2. And then one of our co-developers is actually working on 500 millisecond blocks. So I think Solana right now has 400 millisecond blocks, so this is basically fairly close. And we are approaching the physical limit in some sense, because you need to send data through the network, and you need to have some processing time. So we're not exactly there yet, but basically what we're doing is we're approaching the physical limit of how fast you can have blocks. And when it comes to transactions, you could actually have them in the millisecond level, on that level. Okay, we're going to go to the next slide. My friend, next slide. All right, okay. So one thing we're very proud of is that we managed to break the world record in terms of transactions per second. So we have built Polkadot, and we have tested this. So this is on a live production network. This is the Kusama network, but it's technically identical to Polkadot. It's a live production network running 133,000 transactions per second. Second best is Internet Computer, and then Solana we have over there. So this is the measured live top transactions per second, maximum transactions per second. 140,000, and this was a 23% capacity. So that puts our theoretical limit at the moment at 640,000 TPS, and the guys are still looking for optimizations, right? So what we're looking at here is having a Web3 ecosystem that focuses on onboarding applications that have any kind of demand of what they want to get out. Max, how many minutes do I have? 5 minutes, good. Okay, so then let's talk about Jam a little bit before we close it off. So Jam. Jam is basically the third version of the Polkadot cloud. It's the thing that's currently being built. It's the thing that Gavin Wood will talk about a little bit later. And it's an iteration on the design of a computer. So we're not longer just looking at a blockchain and saying it's a machine that produces blocks, but we're thinking about, let's consider this to be an actual computer. How do we need to change the design of this computer? And so it's the multi-core computer that powers any kind of application on the Polkadot cloud. And we're going to switch to the next slide. You know, the last time I had slides like this was when I was studying in university, and I was like quickly in the last minute, I was exporting it to like from Microsoft PowerPoint to OpenOffice, and then I ran into the same situation. Okay, Jam. So Jam is a transition, and that we are we are not talking so much about cores anymore and so on, but we're actually starting to talk about services. So again, you see this transition into a cloud terminology and into a way of thinking about this like the cloud. So together with the advent of cloud, I don't know, like 15 years ago, there was also this discussion around the service-oriented architecture. So having services that are being able to communicate with each other. And Jam services are a little bit different, but we see that there are similar patterns evolving. So we see a transition from WASM, which is a nice way to have portable applications, to RISC-V, which is a very technical thing. Maybe we'll leave it for Gavin to talk about this. But it's basically, it allows us to, in the future, run these applications on a way how they directly translate into processor instructions. So it allows us to have a much more direct connection with the processor on which the application runs. And I think we're going to have like half of the CPU performance we're going to, if I'm informed correctly, we're going to run the applications with. So it's basically also here we see this pattern of going to a performance that is as close as possible to the physical limits. Right? We're striving to really make it as performant as possible. It's going to have 340 cores, so this is also an improvement. And the data availability, how much data you can send through it, is going to be 2.5 megabytes per second. So I think I'm going to leave mostly with this slide. So what that means is, what is a service? A service is now you have a computer. And this computer is just giving you compute resources. Okay, and now what you can do is you can build your applications on top of it. The first application that we're going to see is the existing Polkadot and its parachains. So it's going to be one of many services, is the service that hosts parachains. But what we can also build on top of it is to have a system that we call Core Play, which is basically smart contracts. And it's going to be smart contracts where you don't have to pay the gas for every transaction that you're executing, but basically you just fill up this actor, this smart contract-like thing, you fill it up, anyone can fill it up, and it can just keep running. And so what it allows us to do is, for example, build an application and it's prepaid, and you can just use it. We're going to enable native integrations with CK rollups, and it's also enable, for example, that you can have Cosmos SDK chains, OpStack, EigenLayer AVSs. Everyone can write a service to support such a system. So what is interesting, right now in the restaking space, you have, I don't know, a dozen or 2 dozen restaking protocols. Very likely not all of them are going to succeed. And so I think in maybe 1, 2, 3 years, we're going to have to question who is going to pick up all those projects building in the restaking space right now. And restaking, if you look at the economics, it's actually fairly expensive. Polkadot, on the economic side, is much, much more cost efficient, right? So I think what's going to be interesting is building services that allow you to run all of those chains. And then I'm going to come to this next, applications, so apps. What I mean is any kind of application, not just blockchains or whatever, but apps. Okay, one funny detail, this is as technical as I'm going to get, it's going to have a shared cache. And so all the data availability that is there for any single application, this data is shared with any other application. So if you consider that you have 2.5 megabytes per second per core, and all of this data is shared and it's staying available for 28 days, if you multiply all the numbers, you get to 2 petabytes. 2 petabytes of data availability. And every application that is running in Polkadot can access those 2 petabytes, which means you have one blockchain ecosystem where you can access all the data that is being produced by any other kinds of service, which again puts us into perspective where we can have a cloud with a service-oriented architecture and we just can tap into all the data that is being produced by all the other services. And then the last point, and this was mind-blowing for me when I heard that they're building this. So it's called transactionless programming. What it means is you don't need to think within transactions. Today, when you write a smart contract or when you write a blockchain, you have to think within the limits of a block or the limits of a transaction. You always have to consider the gas limit. And as a Web3 developer, you tend to forget about this, but this is actually not what you're used to when you learn programming. When you learn programming, you basically could write an application and it could run forever or whatever, how long it takes, right? I know a developer. He had to verify zero knowledge proofs on the blockchain, and he could not fit it into a block. And he was writing for weeks and weeks and weeks to make it fit this single block. This is 3 weeks of his life wasted that would not be necessary if you had transactionless programming. And so the way that is happening is because we're running on RISC-V, we can measure very exactly how long an application is running. And so we just let the program run. And when it hits the limit for a Polkadot block or a core, you just slice it up there. You put that piece in the core. Then you let the program run. You slice the next piece, put it in the core, and you let it run. So it's continuations. And it's just a continuously running application. So in the past, we basically said that Ethereum is Turing complete, but it's not Turing complete because an application cannot run indefinitely. So what Jam is basically allowing us is now to have the first blockchain system in the world that has truly Turing complete applications, which for me was mind-blowing because what it allows us to do is have, when we say any kind of application, it's basically simulations and games, because games are simulations. So one thing that I'm very excited about is that Gavin and his team is working to run Doom on chain. Let's see if they manage to get it to work. But Doom, the game from the 80s, 90s, it's going to run on blockchain. And for me, it's really, really exciting. I think I'm at time roughly, so I'm going to end it here. There's a lot more to talk about, obviously, so you can feel free to reach out later. And I wish you a good rest of the day and a good consensus.